Here we go. Benny up. Come on, Benny.
Presenting Benny Goodman and his orchestra.
Oh dear. Get the chat up. Remember my password. Did I get it right? I did not. There we go. Alright, here we go. Just t-shirting it up today. Morning, Emily and Jamie. Hey, Jeanette. Hey, Emily.
Let's dance to a half-hour rhythm by Benny Goodman and his orchestra, the Raja Rhythm, playing for you from the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel in downtown Chicago.
Hey, Casey. Hey, Jen. Hi, everybody.
Benny Goodman and his orchestra.
Hey, it's Cindy. Been tinkering around with the artwork from Mystericon all morning, I should say. One of those things where you go like, what if I had that word a little bit higher? What if I tried this color? You know. It will be a little bit of a preview of the style of it, at least today. Hey, Timothy. Hey, Carol, Gladys, Amy, Kim, Jean. Hey, well, I'm glad you like them. I didn't realize the big ones were as expensive as they are. Hey, Gail. They seem like they've changed their pricing structure on Cafe Press a bit. I can't figure out quite what I should be putting on it. But thing like 50 of what is going on right now. Thanks, Laura. Hey, Grandma Bell. Everybody all around. Hey, Heather. Hey, Kathleen, who are you seeing again? Give it a little more time. I started a bit late today. I wasn't sure today's not as long as a full-length one, I don't think. So I've been doing other stuff besides research. You know, camera tests and all. Hey, Dad. Hey, Grandma Bell, if I missed you before. Hey, Bob. I don't know, Kristen. Maybe you'll hate the new artwork. I'm gonna preview it a little bit. Actually, you'll probably hate it less than anybody. I'm gonna think of. Yeah, we're gonna be I'm gonna be meeting with Manny today. We'll talk about a little bit about what our plans will be. Hello, Susan. I don't know. I'm enjoying the new logo enough that I think we'll put it on the new artwork enough. I might use it as a logo some. Might put up some more product. I dig it personally. And Kristen, I'm confident we'll get what it's a reference to. Mystera-Con thong might be interesting. The Mystera-thong. I'm already calling it the Mystera Congress. I'm still tweaking a lot on the Mystera-Con art, but it still looks like an album cover. I've been trying to dig up like enough of the public domain stuff, the songs that we talk about here, but they're so scratchy. I mean, so scratchy. But I might as well do a CD or something. Hey, look who's here. Hey, Miles. Look who's been helping me figure out why I can't get sharp pictures on the 16mm lens.
Music by Benny Goodman and his orchestra. And the next tune, Sandman.
Gotta beat this guy. Oh, wait a couple more minutes for people to log on. I will show you. You got to see this shot I took yesterday while walking to the tour spot. Well, a couple of them. Let me pull out a couple here. I can do that then. All right, I think we're long enough afterwards. But I think we can go ahead and get started properly. So welcome along, everybody. Welcome to a Sunday morning edition of Mysterious Chicago Tours. We do mini tours every morning, sometimes a full-length one on Sundays, and full-length ones every Thursday. Today is kind of a ramble. Lately, I've been working on books about cemeteries in New York, so that's what my research is all week. So Sunday morning, I kind of refresh myself and fill everybody else in. I've written a number of books, including Mysterious Chicago, the book, H.H. Holmes, The True History, and of course, Graceland Cemetery, Chicago Stories, Symbols, and Secrets. Next up is going to be like Trinity Church and St. Paul's Church, Stories, Symbols, and Secrets. Also this week I've been working on testing out the new camera that I picked up a week ago. Let me just show you, like here's a shot walking down LaSalle Street. I took a shot of Ceres, the statue on top of the Board of Trade. It came out this clear. And I think this is the smaller version of it too. You can see the seams and everything up there. And this, just from out the car window, is the top of the Jewelers building. And here's the cool thing, we went through a whole thing about a whole series of tours about Fred Dinkelberg, the architect who designed this building, previously worked with Burnham on things like the Flatiron Building in New York. And somebody had told me online that he had his initials hidden somewhere on here. And in fact, on a larger shot, you can see they're on there twice. Just in this shot alone, you can see right there in the circle. It does say FD 1926. So how cool is that? But all right, everybody. So today we're going to cover some of the research that I've been working on at Trinity Churchyard just in this past week. I'm working my way through the end of the southern section of the cemetery and the first couple of sections of the north section. It hasn't been as busy a research week as I've sometimes made it. A lot of the ones that I came to in that plot I'd already written ahead of time, so I'm a little bit ahead for once in my life. So here we go. Let's just take a walk on in. Moving inwards, we'll pass these tourists. And make our way on up here. So right over here in this section, it's kind of hard for me to map this out because this one section is intersected by sidewalk right in the middle, which doesn't happen too much. But we just passed over a space here. Actually, we're gonna move down over to here. So back on the other side of the cemetery, this is famously Alexander Hamilton, and just in front of him, the smaller one there is Eliza Hamilton, his wife. They don't have an identity for the larger box tomb that's right in front and center in this picture. Box tomb is the term for these. It's kind of a misnomer because they're not really tombs. They look as though the coffin would be right inside. They're really not. There's no floor on these things. It's just dirt. But having it be like this, covering up the entire grave, looked a little more impressive and also made it a little bit harder for grave robbers to dig down. Not that much harder, but harder. This one I have identified as one that never had a name on it. The epitaph used to just say, "My mother," possibly with an exclamation point in some versions of it. It was one of the most famous graves at Trinity at the time. People wrote poems about this. Every article about it rhapsodized about the beauty of just saying "my mother" instead of the person's name, which nowadays we might not be as overwhelmed by. But based on extant descriptions of it, I'm pretty sure it's this one. It might be the one just to the left of it, but pretty sure that it's this one. But just over to the side, there's a whole bunch of these box tombs and slab graves over in this general vicinity. One of them, you have to kind of work to read this one, but it is a guy named Richard Sharwin. Now, Richard Sharwin was a merchant in New York, a loyalist merchant who made an awful lot of money supplying uniforms and stuff. But after the war, demand for his business just plummeted. But thankfully for him, kind of conveniently, he died 3 months before the British evacuated. Business was already crashing. He had to move out of his big house. But it's after his death that the story gets more interesting. With some of the money, his wife, Anne Sharwin, bought an enslaved person from a guy named Robert Townsend. And here's where it gets even weirder. Robert Townsend had grown up in the household of Samuel Townsend, which had several enslaved servants, one of whom was a woman by the name of Elizabeth. So Elizabeth then, when the house was occupied by British troops, Elizabeth escaped with the troops, possibly thinking that they were going to free her, but in fact they were not. They were just going to keep her as a slave for themselves. So a few years later, Robert moved to New York and was working as a spy for George Washington. He was known as Culper Jr., part of the Culper spy ring that helped let Washington know that the British knew that the French troops were coming. He was one of the most notable ones, but he was so secretive about it, he wasn't identified until the 1930s. Even George Washington didn't know who this guy was. But one day he was working in his shop, and who should walk in but Elizabeth, the enslaved woman who had escaped from his family's house, and she came in and said, "They're about to take me to Nova Scotia. Can you buy me again?" And he agreed to, so he repurchased her, and there's like entries in his logbook, that he'd bought tea for her and things. But then shortly thereafter, he sold her to Anne Sharwin, and there's an interesting thing in the contract. The contract mentions that Elizabeth knew Anne Sharwin and was willing to go live with her, and there was also a clause stating that if Anne ever decided she wanted to sell her, Robert would buy her back. But things got a little bit weird from here because Anne went and got remarried, then swiftly divorced. The guy that she married sold Elizabeth under the table to a guy in Charleston. Robert, meanwhile, had joined the Manumission Society. When he found out that she had been sold to Charleston, he went and confronted the guy, then went and bought her back from the guy in Charleston, and then freed her. So this has been the subject of a whole book, Espionage and Enslavement in the Revolution. It's certainly not a stretch to imagine that Elizabeth might have helped with some of the spying activities. I don't think that we're ever going to find a document that would back that up. I'm even a little bit unsure if we're if we're all really in agreement about Robert Townsend himself. It was identified based on his handwriting in the 1930s. My first thought was it a relative who identified the handwriting? Um, Tough to say for sure. But this is one of those things that barely has to do with Richard Sharwin himself. But it was one of these things when I find that people, when the only thing that comes up about them is stuff with their relation to slavery, I'd rather write about the people they enslaved. It's like, okay, you don't get to be in the book. The people you enslaved do. It's kind of how I'm dealing with how difficult this is. Slavery just permeated every aspect of New York society in the 1700s. You couldn't get away from it any more than we can get away from sweatshop labor today. It's not a perfect analogy. But a few of the others that I've looked up this week, I love this gravestone so much. It's like the drunken-looking death's head. This is a woman by the name of Susan Rousby. Not a whole lot is really known about Susan, other than it mentions here that she was the daughter of Obda Hunt. Obla-dee, obla-da. The Obadiah Hunt has a gravestone that's inside of Trinity Church. He presumably must have been out in the churchyard at one point, but the gravestone was saved. It mentions that he was at the founding of Trinity Church, and in fact, was the guy who named Trinity Church. And now his daughter has this monument with a death's head that kind of looks like he's had one too many. No jokes about the Drunken Ghost Tour, please. Nearby, we've got this one that says, here, well, you can read on it now, this is also a kind of a moon-faced death's head. This one, here lies body of Mkur. Mkur is an interesting name. It's because of the grass, you can't read what's down below it. Though a lot of this gravestone is buried because it probably broke years ago. But it says that he is the son of Hugh and Effie Crawford. Hugh Crawford was a tavern owner in New York. There were stories about what a huge party he threw in his tavern the day that it was announced that King George's War had ended. This was a bloody conflict that had spilled over into the colonies a few times. Massachusetts lost a huge number of people. There was always a danger it would happen in New York. So they had a particularly big party at the home of Hugh Crawford's. Lights on all over the place. But dude was often broke, as seen here. This is a newspaper ad I found for him. All persons indebted to Hugh Crawford of this city, Vintner, are desired to make speedy payment. I want money. Actually, I want money. Da-da, bleeding around, come on, money. Da-da. All right. His wife, he died a few months after this. His wife took over the tavern ownership and had to take out other ads like this, like, if you owe any money to us, pay up right now. Let's check out the rest of this ad up above. Is this thing. In a short time will be published a new method of controversy, or an easy way of shortening debates by allowing only one side to publish their thoughts, containing also reasons for abolishing the liberty of the press. This is 1747. I've come up with some really hilarious things for what the dashed out name might be, but I can't say any of them on a Sunday morning tour. High five between these two death's heads. Just notice the crossbones in between them there. That's pretty cool. This is Margaret Blake, also her son, so maybe they're supposed to be holding hands, but no, it looks like a high five. We're also going to cover... So here's a picture of the churchyard taken about 1899, I think they took this one. There's this slab grave in the middle, rather elaborate one on the left, and one with a cupid over beside it. I'd like to really recreate this shot. You have to really get into the grass to do it properly. But here's about as close as you can come. You can see the slab and you can see the old elaborate one there, and then the one next to it that is missing. The one with the cupid is no longer there. And Mandy and I have both been like looking and looking, trying to figure out, running it through every AI program, but I think probably by the time they took this picture, it was already illegible. The one on the left, of course, you can see it was much more well carved back then. It's faded a lot over the last century. But that one, at least we know who it was. It was a guy by the name of James Searle. And what did I have on James Searle here? Let me just double check. Didn't write him up yet. Great. Or did I? Oh, no, he'd be over in this section. James Searle. He was a merchant, and his epitaph said he was a man of unspotted reputation and happy disposition. You don't really see happy disposition much. Amiable comes up so much, I'm not even going to bother quoting it for anybody. It was just kind of a generic filler. But the slab grave to the right is even more mysterious, frankly, than the missing one. But at least we know what it says on it. Here it is from the back. This is the grave of Charlotte Temple, which is bizarre because Charlotte Temple was not a real person. Charlotte Temple was a character in a book. The book Charlotte Temple, A Tale of Truth, came out in the late 1700s and was the biggest seller in the United States for the first half of the 19th century. It's about a young woman named Charlotte who's about 15 when she is seduced by a British officer, taken to America, and abandoned, eventually dies in childbirth. The guy who had seduced and abandoned her happens to come upon her funeral and is so distraught that he immediately kneels on the grave and offers her father the chance to kill him. He doesn't take it, so he goes to his best friend's house and challenges him to a duel and stabs him to death, then dies insensible and muttering about how much he misses Charlotte a couple of years later. It never specifies which churchyard it is in the book. It never mentions any street names or specific locations, but for years people would point out around New York, here's where Charlotte Temple lived, here's the boarding house where Charlotte Temple stayed. Kind of like how we point out the Friends apartment or the Seinfeld restaurant in New York nowadays. Because rumors had gone around that these were all based on real people. But now there's this grave right here. And it was written up over and over in the late 19th century. Every article about Trinity talked about the grave of Charlotte Temple and usually recounted her story as though it was true. But no story about the cemetery mentions it from before the 1840s. In the 1840s, the whole church was rebuilt. The going theory is that some rather bored workman probably carved the name Charlotte Temple onto here. But then again, there's this missing plaque space. One story that went around as an explanation was Charlotte's daughter, the baby she died giving birth to, came to the cemetery one year and had the sexton point out where her mother was under her real name, had this grave made with a plaque that had her real name on it, but somewhere along the line that plaque was stolen, so during reconstruction of work they added the more common name for her. There's no evidence whatsoever to back this up. By all accounts, it's probably just a prank. They actually lifted up the stone just a few years ago to see if there was any vault or anything underneath. But still, I don't think we've ever explained why the guy would have carved out the plaque space there. Possibly just he was bored and still carving stuff. But I think I got to admire the guy. Apparently he was just a prank, but it's a prank that ended up being written into major newspapers at the time, stated as fact over and over again, and we're still talking about it a good 180 years later. You really got to take your hat off to a prank like that. We'll also move down over here, check out this monument, the Martyrs Monument it's called. And we'll zoom in a bit on this gravestone, a butcher named James Leeson. And down below where it's broken off, there's you can just barely make out that there used to be some text down there. It took some doing, but I did figure out what it used to say. It's a fairly generic epitaph with some Freemason stuff. It's got a lot of Freemason symbols here. I'll zoom in. Like you can see an hourglass with wings. You know why you put wings on an hourglass? Because you wanted to see time fly. It's a Bazooka Joe joke. But up at the top in the arch, you can see these strange symbols. It's a secret code arranged by putting letters into a tic-tac-toe grid. And what it says, if you spell it out, it says, remember death. There's another guy at St. Paul's who has the exact same cryptogram and the exact same solution, though I think he uses a slightly different answer key. I got to double check on that one. He's even harder to see than Mr. Leeson is here. Not much is known of Leeson. Obviously, he was a Freemason. The 4 lines of text said something along the lines of the lodge above. I've got it written down. But it is also right next to the thing I've been working on the article for today. This is known as the Martyrs Monument. The story goes that a lot of prisoners of war during the Revolution were buried here in this northern strip of ground at Trinity Churchyard. And Trinity has a kind of a complicated legacy with the Revolution. In the build up to it, it was a loyalist church. It was run by the Church of England. Naturally, these guys remained loyal to the church. And the guy who was the bishop at the time was writing about this, what a lamentable state of affairs this whole rebellion thing is, and talked about how one day 100 soldiers with their drums marched in the middle of the church, and we thought we were going to be massacred, and they beat out their drums, but I just preached as though nothing was going on. But the thing is, middle of 1776, there was a big fire and the church burned down. For most of the Revolution, this entire space was just rubble and gravestones. But nearby, there were the prison ships. There was a sugar house, Mr. Livingston's sugar house, being used as a prison, from which hundreds and probably thousands of soldiers died. They were kept in abominable conditions. They had very little to eat. What they did have to eat was pretty rancid. Disease ruled the day. And every day, the sexton would show up with bodies. Now, there's not really a lot of data about where they are. In Fort Greene, there's a monument with some bones to the people who were in the prison ships. But even then, whether they were actually the bones of them is not exactly known. But then, in the 1830s, there started being a big movement to extend Albany Street, which dead ends right about here, and have it go through the north end of Trinity Churchyard. This would have cut off the churchyard a little bit. And of course, Trinity howled, "No, there are famous revolutionary guys buried there." And some people said, "No, there's not. These are just like merchants and stuff. You've never minded when people like this got moved from other cemeteries. And you just built that building, the Trinity building, and we know that you found bodies then and just kind of carted them off." But Trinity was very much opposed to the extension of Albany Street. It was something that came up over and over again. And eventually they landed on saying this is where the people from the sugar house were buried. They even had a couple of secondhand accounts. One person said, "I used to know an old woman, and she told me that she used to get fuel for her house by burning up the boards of coffins they dug up to make room for the prison ship people." A couple of people said their fathers were in the sugar house, and they always at least understood that the bodies were being taken to Trinity. There's really nothing solid to say that they were taken to Trinity at all, let alone this particular strip. But they decided in 1853 they were going to put the monument right here, right where the city was talking about extending the street. And according to one guy, the day that they installed it, there was a plaque on it with the epitaph that they had borrowed from Shakespeare's grave in England. It said, "Blessed be he that spares these stones, and cursed be he that moves my bones." They chickened out and took it out after a day, according to this guy. But it was a pretty clear message on Trinity's part: don't make a road here. And really, this went back and forth for like 20 years. They'd pass a resolution, the resolution would get vetoed, there'd be a whole bunch of arguments coming up, there'd be arguments for, arguments against. It's been really fascinating reading going through it. Personally, I kind of doubt the story about burning up the coffin boards for fuel. It just doesn't seem sanitary to me. But maybe that's just me. So that's where I am right now. And quick plug for the upcoming stuff. Thursday night, we're doing a time travel pub crawl. There'll be a lot of New York stuff. That happens to be my birthday, so we will party. And on July 15th, next weekend, what was that? July 15th, next weekend, we will be doing H.H. Holmes' The Devil Downtown as a walking tour. So always a lot of cool stuff coming up around here. Everybody, thanks a lot for joining me. Hope you liked the new overlay down below there a second ago. And with that, we will put the Benny Goodman back on and just kind of hang out for a bit like we usually do. Thanks, everybody. That's what I've been up to this week. Thanks, Marcia. Kristen, nah. Now, they didn't invite me for a drink with a special friend. They just said, "You need a drink. Come on in." Then the special friend just came up to, well, first this dude with the mustache came in. "I'm going to take care of you." Then he passes me over to the special friend. He's like, "What is your name?" I'm like, "I'm Doug." "Hello, Doug. Will you buy me a drink?" I was squirming the whole time. I don't know how to function in those spaces. Now, Rodney, my grandpa was a Mason, too. That's how I know they're nothing special. They never would have let that putz join.
Benny Goodman is playing for you from the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel in downtown Chicago. And his next tune,
But in those days, the 1800s or 1700s, when you became successful, you joined the Masons. It was just what you did. Ash, not a full one, no. I'll have to write that. Right now, I'm trying. I went down I spent way too much time trying to figure out if there was some reason why ship captains seem to have gravestones so much more often than the average person. At least at Trinity and St. Paul, there's just such a lot of ship captains here, with markers. One interesting line in the debate about whether to build the road through is somebody started talking about Professor Bush says that there will not be a physical resurrection on Judgment Day, it will be a spiritual resurrection. We happen to agree. If it is a physical resurrection, that churchyard is said to hold 300,000 bodies. That is going to be one crowded graveyard if Professor Bush is wrong. Professor Bush was a Swedenborgian, the grand uncle of George H.W. Bush. Timberly is very much that Groucho line. I would never join a club that would have somebody like me as a member. I think a lot of these guys were not only Masons, they also joined the Odd Fellows and everything else. It's like probably what they told their wives they were doing when they were going out at night. They didn't have television, they had to do something. Susan, I just saw a great. She was like, "Man, I'm a member of this awesome club called Fight Club. I just went to my first meeting. I just can't wait to talk. I missed the first part of the meeting, but it's a really awesome club. You guys got to hear all about this club." It's something with the research is I try to take these secret organizations seriously because obviously these were important to these people, so if they were important to them, I need to take it seriously when writing about them. On the other hand, I have a very difficult time taking these organizations seriously. Debbie, as I understand it, Masons, they do believe in God. It's just kind of like a supplement to your religion. I was on Story TV last night. I'm not even familiar with Story TV. Controls the British crown, who keeps the metric system down? We do. There was a terrific Moose Lodge joke on Beavis and Butthead last week. in which Mr. Anderson is kidnapped by aliens and thinks he's being taken to an Elks Lodge.
There must be someone waiting who feels the way I do. Whoever you are you alone, alone on this night that we choose to share? Alone, alone with your kiss that could make me care. And when you come, I'll promise to be your very own.
So next I gotta go to Section 2 in the north side. The Martyrs Monument ought to fill up the rest of the Section 1B section of the north side. And I just got the rest of those to do over the next few weeks. Then I gotta rush through Ghost of Chicago 10th Anniversary Edition. I don't want to rush through it. I want to do it well. But that should be probably the August job, or a week or so in August. There's not that much updating to do. Book's already written. I don't have to write the whole thing. Just gotta make sure I get a good copy of it. The one that I've got, maybe it still has all the typos. I don't know if I have the fully copy edited one or the final one,
And here's another tune
other than a
that'll be
scan or
played
maybe a
as long as we
PDF.
can. Stardust.
Here in Chicago, our most impressive memorials tend to be our lumbermen and brewers. Sometimes department store kingpins. Now, Elks, you know, Joanne, I think primarily the Elks are a social club more than anything else. Michael Moore has a great story about how his father tried to join the Elks and then found that they were white only, still in like the early 70s. So when he saw that there was a Elks Club essay contest, he entered just kind of as a prank and won, and showed up at the ceremony. He's like, I know what you guys are up to. I don't want your stupid trophy. And that got him his first national news. And in the fallout, the rules were changed and they lost their liquor license for being white only. Do I know where Peter Hand is buried? Off the top of my head, I do not. Alright, my main job today is I gotta clean this place. It's a clean all the things kind of day. Here's Miles. Here you go, buddy. Hop up. Come say hi. I bet my Lisa. I hit 700 days on Duolingo yesterday. Miles. Thanks, Rodney. That's a pretty good size apartment. It's a trade-off for not being too close to the trains. All right, there's Benny wrapping up So thanks a lot for joining me, everybody. I'm Adam from Mysterious Chicago Tours. We'll be back tomorrow morning for Mural Monday. And until then, everybody, stay safe and stay strong. And of course, if you can, everybody, listen to this guy purr. Stay spooky, everybody.